Welcome back. It's time to get back to building web pages, but this time with JavaScript. Up until now, we've learned HTML and CSS, and then we learned JavaScript, but separately. The true power, though, comes when we combine all these three technologies. Now, in the previous videos, I mentioned how JavaScript allowed actions to be performed on the web page. Well, what did I mean there? By adding JavaScript to our web pages, we now have the power that we never had with HTML and CSS. We can change all the HTML elements in the page. We can change all the HTML attributes in the page, change all the CSS styles on the page, remove existing HTML elements and attributes, add new HTML elements and attributes, and JavaScript can also react to existing HTML events, or it can create its own HTML events on the page. Now, some of these things, like changing CSS styles or HTML attributes and elements, well, we could kind of do them before, but with JavaScript, we can do this while the user is on the page. Let's look at the diagram. We requested the HTML, and then the web browser saw the link tag, grabbed the CSS, and before we use JavaScript, if we wanted to change the style or change how the HTML looked, maybe we want to click on the About page, well, we would request the HTML and the CSS all over again to change how the web page looked. But now, with JavaScript, all you need is this, and JavaScript can do that all for you, if you wanted to, all on the same page. Now, in this section, we're going to learn all of that. In order to do that, though, we must go back to our diagrams and understand two things. One is the DOM, and the second is the JavaScript engine. Up to this point, we spoke how HTML gets requested, then CSS. Then the browser does something special. It creates something called the DOM that kind of looks like this. When a web page is loaded, the browser creates the DOM, which stands for Document Object Model. You see over here that we have document with root element HTML. We have a head element, body element, with some A tags and H1 tags. What does this really mean? You can actually see the same thing in the console, so let's check that out. So the DOM, or the Document Object Model, is simply document. So over here, if we open up the document, there you go. We have the same thing that we saw in the Elements tab. Let me close the style over here. Right in the console. Now, why do we need the DOM? Well, we needed a way to get, change, add, or delete HTML elements. So the DOM was created so we can do something like this. Document.write hello. And watch what happens to the web page. It changes to hello. So the DOM is something a browser creates to allow us to modify the HTML and CSS. Okay, now what about the other phrase that I mentioned? The JavaScript engine. Well, up to this point, we talked about how each browser loads up JavaScript and it magically reads it. What does that even mean? Well, each browser has a thing called JavaScript engine. And they all have pretty cool names. Chrome has V8 engine, Edge has Chakra Core, Safari has Nitros, and Firefox has SpiderMonkey. And what they do is they're the ones that look at the JavaScript file and read it line by line and execute the JavaScript. So how do these two tie together? Well, now we can use JavaScript to talk with the DOM. You see, when we did document.write, that was JavaScript, wasn't it? That looks like an object, and it had the right method that accepted an argument, hello. Web browsers allow us to access the DOM through the document object. And that's what it is. It's an object. And now we have the power that we mentioned before to do all these things, to essentially modify how our web page looks. So knowing what we do, document is the screen that we see in the browser. Right over here. And the document, as I mentioned, is just an object. Now, does it have a parent object? Well, as a matter of fact, it does. It's called a window. And you see over here, a window is an object with a whole ton of properties. But if we scroll to here, we see that one of the properties is document. And it even highlights it for us. And if we open up the document, it has more properties. Also, remember alert and prompt? Look at that. The window object has alert. So let's try something. If I did window.alert, check, will this still work? Let's see. Yep, it still works. The reason that alert worked like this was because window is, you can think of it as the big parent of everything in a browser. Window is an object that describes this browser. And anytime you use a method like alert, if you don't specify anything, it assumes that you're talking about the window object, the biggest parent. But remember document.write? Could we do that on the window object? Let's check this. I get an error. Window.write is not a function because it doesn't exist as a property of window. It exists as a property of document, which is a property of window. So let's recap. A web browser has a window object that has a property document that specifies what should get displayed. To decide what to get displayed, the document object, the document object model, reads the HTML and CSS, and then JavaScript that is read line by something like a JavaScript engine in Google Chrome, that's the V8 engine, reads through it, and if it ever needs to change anything, JavaScript can speak with the document object and modify the HTML and CSS. So using our newfound power in the next video, we're going to start manipulating the DOM to make our websites more interactive with JavaScript. Let's get started. Bye-bye.